Just to say a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for coming in this very warm weather, and I know there's been some travel issues as well, so thank you for coming. So this session is something we've called Memory Box, and it's going to be kind of an open mic discussion where people are going to share their stories relating to migration, borders, diasporas, and it also has loosely connected to Partition, which there's a number of anniversaries that we are commemorating during the festival. The 75 years of India's independence, the creation of Pakistan, it's 51 years of Bangladesh, and also we want to note that it has been 50 years since the expulsion of South Asians from Uganda. I'm just going to start to invite Oliver Irvine, who is the director of SOAS Library, to say some words about the festival and about our amazing library. And then we're going to open up the event to a few of our speakers that are built on the Eventbrite, who are going to share their stories as part of Memory Box. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Zana, and welcome everybody on behalf of SOAS. It's a great pleasure to be here this afternoon and to mark, that is, the opening of this really interesting session called Memory Box. Libraries, SOAS Library is an extraordinary institution in its own right within SOAS, and many of you may have used it. Some of you know will have your works in SOAS Library, which we're very grateful. And there's something particular about the contents of SOAS Library in relation to South Asian memory, which I just want to touch upon a little bit. It's easy to think of SOAS Library as a product of colonial enterprise and colonial interest, but in many ways it's not that. It's not the same. Hasn't been formed in the same way as other institutions such as the British Library and other UK libraries relating to South Asia. Those institutions benefited from something called Colonial Legal Deposit, which was a abbreviated name, which was an Act of Parliament passed in 1874, and which allowed places like the British Museum Library and the Indian Office Library to collect official publications wherever they were produced. And on the whole, it seems that the British Museum Library collected about 25% of the output, and the Indian Office Library collected about another 25% of the output, with very little overlap, but also very little coordination between them. And this meant that when the two were merged in the 1980s in the British Library as it is today, it came to approximately 30 or 40, 50% of the total output for a period of time from the sort of 1870s right through to the 1930s and 40s. Whereas the contents of libraries like SOAS tend to be much more ephemeral, actually. They tend to be much more about the production of place and people. We obviously have official things, but they also are a different kind of character. And that makes it incredibly important. And it makes it incredibly important for the character of SOAS and for the character of the research that's capable of being supported by SOAS Library. So, although the library is not expressly a repository of memory, it does contain lots of memories within it. It contains lots of primary sources, and particularly rich on 20th century archives, and particularly those for the British memory of parts of the world. And that's a really important facet of this. But we're also a memory in the sense of the intellectual output and intellectual debate and discussion has gone on. We're also a place that makes content available without discretion, so that there's as little as possible filter or as little as possible restriction on what anybody can see from SOAS Library or what anybody can ask to see for any question that anybody wants to ask. And that's really important. And it's also important because of the nature of memory. And I'm no expert on this, but it is very, very keenly aware that memory is a linear process. It doesn't necessarily have a beginning and end date and work its way through time. You keep from one to the other. We all remember things in particular ways associated with particular moments or particular events that are either joyful, traumatic, whatever they happen to be. And there's something about the happenstance of discovery about memories and lives, which I think is really important. And that's the final thing I just want to touch upon, which is that we're very proud of the fact in SOAS Library that our collections are open access, open shelf. You can walk around the entire, for example, top floor of SOAS Library, and you can pretty much see the overwhelming majority of all the material we've got related to South Asia. And not see it through having a search catalogue, but see it because you can see it with your own eyes on the shelf and can make those discoveries. You think you want one volume, but actually it's the volume next to it, which you never even heard about, which is the one that actually illuminates your question or links to your own experience of the world. And that element of happenstance, that element of things not happening in a consistent linear order as the way which memory functions, I think is so important. So we're really pleased in SOAS Library to be supporting this festival and these 2 days at SOAS actively, not just by being here, but by actually supporting it. And also, of course, Farzana, who's a very significant member of our library team, is playing such an important role in organising this festival. I'd like to just thank her as well, because the first opportunity I have had publicly to thank Farzana for taking a lead in this on behalf of SOAS and SOAS Library. And I won't delay any further, just say you're all incredibly welcome at SOAS. I think many of you are frequent visitors to us, and if you're not, it's your first time, equally welcome. And thank you for finding a way here, despite our front door being temporarily out of action. So it's perseverance again is very much appreciated. Thank you very much. I'll hand you over. And I'll come back to Farzana. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. So we're going to now have Jonah, who's going to come and speak about his amazing organisation called Blindian. I'll hand it over to you now, Jonah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hope that we are well today. My name is Jonah Batumsi. I'm an interdisciplinary artist and founder and CEO of the Blindian Project. Thank you, Farzana, and SOAS and South Asian History Month for having me here today. As I was putting these memories together, it just reconfirmed to me how important our stories are, our memories are, and our family histories are. And I just encourage everybody to continue to look into their own. So as you can see from this first slide here, I have been around the world and back. And so this is a story of migration and identity as well too.
You clicking on the mark.
There we go. Right. Okay. So my story starts in Uganda. These are my parents. My mother, Charlotte Kalubia Batumzi, her grandfather was a gentleman by the name of Sarwana Kalubia. He was the first African mayor of Kampala, and he also was influential in fighting for independence and getting independence for Uganda. So it was interesting as I was researching him last few days over the internet. I couldn't find a picture of him. And it just struck me as somebody who was so kind of influential and did so much for the country, why he wasn't on the internet. So again, as I said before, as we're looking at our family histories and stories, just I encourage everybody to try to get that information together. So my father, Winston Batumsi, he is from a place called Jinja. He grew up in a place called Budondo, which is on the shores of the River Nile. So he grew up in the village. He told me stories about him walking 7 miles to school. Has anyone else heard those stories? I think a lot of us have experienced that ourselves as well too. So he told me he walked 7 miles to school every day. He told me that he studied by candlelight, and having visited the place where he's from, I can lay testament to that. So he is a cardiologist still. He attended a conference in Budapest, and he was given the opportunity to go to Chicago. So we're talking about Uganda, and we're talking about the expulsion of South Asians, which happened in '72. My mother and my father fled Uganda in 1975. My mother was working in an administrative office that Idi Amin actually passed through. He made a few comments about taking a liking to my mother, and my father decided that it was time to leave town. So, Chicago, Illinois. That is me on the left, and that's me on the right as well too. So I was born in Chicago, Illinois, '79, one of 3 children, and grew up in the Midwest. So we started in Chicago, and then thereafter we moved to the cornfields of Central Illinois to a place called Bloomington Normal. Bloomington Normal was about 150,000 people, big. I'd say it's probably 85 to 90% white. So growing up as one of the only African-American or African children in the class was, there was a bit of a struggle with identity, and I find this is something that a lot of people can relate to, whether they're Black, South Asian, or other people of color. That struggle of being in a society, obviously as in the US, individualistic society, having come from a place which is, very collectivist and close family bonds. So growing up for me was interesting. It wasn't like today where we have things like Afrobeats, if people are familiar with Afrobeats, or just the kind of a brighter picture of what Africa is, shall we say. So I struggled with that growing up. Right, so my adolescence, growing up, some of the things that were influential in my childhood. As a young child, music was a very big part of my life, especially hip hop culture. I remember the time when the tapes had parental advisory on them. I don't know if anyone else remembers that time as well too, but I remember having these tapes and having to hide them from my mother and father because I did not want them to know I was listening to that music. But very much shaped who I am and who I was as a person back then. And just thinking about, kind of going against the system and not always believing what we're being fed. Technology was another thing that was very big to me. I remember my parents bought me this Apple IIc computer that I used to play on and take apart. And technology became an outlet for me. It became a place where I started to bond with community. If anyone remembers the AOL chat rooms, or when you had to log online by listening to this crackling sound going for about 30, 45 seconds, and then you were online. I spent a lot of time in AOL chat rooms, and just this whole concept of community, I think that's where it really started for me. And basketball was another very important thing for me. So from about the age of 12, I started playing basketball, teamwork, camaraderie, leadership, having people on the team who were very, very good, having people on the team who weren't as good, but also recognizing that these people needed to come along the journey as well too. So these were things that helped shape me, and they helped give me an anchor, shall we say, as I was trying to, as I was growing up in the society where a lot of people didn't know what it was to be African. I remember my last name is Potomzy, so what we did in the States every morning is we would do the Pledge of Allegiance, and they would also do roll call. And in roll call, they go through A to Z, they go through their names. And my last name is Potomzy, so I was at the very beginning of that line. And no matter how many teachers I went through, they never figured out how to say my name. And this is another kind of common recurring thing that we see for people of color that we experience. So that was my adolescence. So when I finished playing basketball, because I played basketball collegiately, I was a scholarship athlete, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be known as somebody else than just a basketball player. And so study abroad was going around at that time. It wasn't very big. And I remember had an opportunity. I thought I was going to go to Italy, which is where I really wanted to go. But I ended up in Dublin. And this was right after September 11th. In fact, my flight was canceled because of September 11th. So I think I flew out the 13th or the 14th. And I found myself in Dublin, which is very, very interesting. I don't know how many people have been to Dublin. Anybody? No hands? Okay, right. So I went back to Dublin, I'd say in 2005, after this point in time. And the amount of people that you saw from Ulster had increased largely. So there are a lot of Chinese there are a lot of people from Central Africa there at that time. But when I was there, it wasn't as such. So a lot of people saw me, they knew that I wasn't, they knew I wasn't Irish, right? They knew I was from elsewhere. And it was just a really interesting time because as I mentioned, September 11th had just happened. A lot of people were asking me questions. They were asking me what my stance was on the US foreign policy, what I thought about this, what I thought about that. And to be honest, I had never thought about that type of stuff before. So I had very much been in this athletic basketball bubble where I didn't really need to think about the world in that way. I was living very, very day to day. I wasn't really thinking about the broader picture. So having people ask me those questions really allowed me to open my perspectives to the world. And in 2001, I met a South Asian Telugu woman princess who became my wife. Her name is Sveta. And what I tell people about this as well too is up until that point in time, I'd probably studied with, let's say 5 or 10 South Asian Indian kids, never had any intimate conversations with any of them. They were very quiet. They sat in the back of the class, they did their work, and then they disappeared and they came back the next day. So at 21 years of age, I had my first intimate conversation with a South Asian / Indian person. And it just expanded my mind in terms of culture, food, religion, spirituality, so many different things that I hadn't really thought about before. And going back earlier to the earlier story, when I was talking about from my parents being from Uganda, I grew up eating samosas, but I had no idea where these samosas or how they got into our cuisine. My mother made them, right? And later on, I discovered how that came to be, but I'll get to that point. So Dublin Island, I meet my wife Sveta here. And this is Sveta here. There's Sveta, my wife there. This is 2007. We were married at Tatton Park in Manchester, England. The top picture is just parts of my family, some parts of Uganda, people from India. And this is the group of aunties that welcomed me. So I remember the group of aunties, probably 4 or 5 of them came up to me and they made a point of telling me, we've been to other weddings like yours. We know people, we know couples like you. I didn't really know what they meant. They were trying to make me feel welcome. Yes, they were. And I appreciated that because it was genuine and it was heartfelt, but I didn't really know what they were talking about. Again, sorry, one thing I didn't say, even back to the Dublin time in 2001, I had never heard of Diwali. I had no concept of Diwali. I didn't know anything about a lot of things that go on in the culture. So when they told me that, I didn't know what they were actually speaking about. Okay, so I'm gonna play, what was the video played here? I don't think we'll play, but I'll tell you now. I was just saying this video will play, but it's okay.
To step down. So it's meant to play.
Yeah, but don't worry, I'll just talk to it. Right, so when I studied abroad, I had a lot of friends back in the States, and a lot of my friends didn't have passports.
Sparked outrage across
Just
the
pause
media.
it. I'll play it. Thank you. So yeah, I grew up with friends who didn't have passports, a lot of friends who may not leave the state, who would not leave the country. So I started writing when I studied abroad. And this was to basically try to pass on knowledge to them and just kind of share my experiences. And in 2017, we had 2 kids at that point in time. We were traveling back to India for the first time as a family. And I saw this Al Jazeera article. And it was about African students in India. So I'll just play this. There's a trigger warning on this. There's a little bit of violence. So if anyone wants to turn their head, feel free to do so.
Sparked outrage across India.
Sorry. Do I get the ones?
Videos shared on Facebook show a mob descending on a group of Nigerian students. In the shopping mall outside New Delhi, hundreds of attackers with chairs and sticks to hit the Africans.
Were using break to knock the glass, trying to open the door. Me and my brother, just me and my brother, we trying to draw the door back.
The attack occurred during a vigil for a teenager who died of a suspected drug overdose. Some people blamed a group of Nigerians for the boy's death.
During the end of the session, when they reached Ansel Mall, they spotted some Nigerian students who were shopping. They got violent when they saw them and attacked.
5 people have been arrested. India's foreign minister took to social media, insisting there would be a quick response. I have spoken to Yogi Adityanath, Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, about an attack on African students in Greater Noida. He has assured me there will be a fair and impartial investigation into this unfortunate incident. It has once again brought attention to discrimination.
All right, so that gives you I'll get this back. Right, so this was an eye-opener for me. I wanted to educate myself. I wanted to educate myself about colorism, caste, anti-Blackness. I wanted to educate myself in general. From the beginning slide, as you saw, we had two young kids. My wife is Indian as well too, extended family, etc. So this wasn't just something for me, but something that I thought I was doing for my kids and for my family as well too. And what I decided is that I was going to write or create something about this experience and about what I have experienced. In our relationship up to that point in time, we had gone 10 years and I had never seen any other couples that resembled us. So I had seen couples who were South Asian, Indian, and white, but I had never seen that mix with Black. So I decided that there was an opportunity to help people share their stories. And I didn't really know what that looked like. I didn't know how many people were out there. I just knew that I was looking for something, right? Sorry, the reason why I have this here, people probably know this movie, but it's celebrated 30th anniversary since it was created in 91, 92. Now, to me, this is still one of the greatest pieces of, I will call it Black and brown love that's been created, which I find somewhat sad in a way that we've gone 30 years and it still holds up as being like a seminal piece of content that was created. But nonetheless, I thought that there was an opportunity, right? So I was writing at that point in time, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna email some people. This is the actual email, which was funny thinking about that memory, but this is the email that I sent out to the people, right? So I had been stalking a few people online, and yes, I was stalking them, and I asked them if they wanted to contribute to something that I was calling a photo collage. And 10 people from around the world submitted their pictures and their stories. And I packaged it up really crudely, and I put it out into the world. And that was the beginning of what I called the Blindian. It's called the Blindian Project, and it was very personal to me because obviously, Black, and my wife being Indian, was called the Blindian Project, and people essentially submitted stories, couples and individuals. As you can see here, I basically gave them free rein. I just told them, write whatever you want to write about this experience. And very much was a place for acceptance. I don't know if any people in the room here know any couples that are Black and South Asian or Indian. Anybody in the room? We already had the talk, so you can't answer. But a lot of people in these relationships oftentimes pushed to the fringes, kind of pushed under the rug, not really dealt with. Some people disowned from their families, cut off from their families. So this was a place where they could actually be uplifted. And, it was very therapeutic, even being able to express their story when oftentimes they hadn't been able to talk to family, friends, or anybody about it. So that was it. It was a mixture of a lot of different things. I personally always knew that it was more powerful than just talking about love stories, even though love is a foundation that I feel is it's an important thing to think about and remember. So this is essentially what it started at and what it's grown from. Okay. In last year, June of last year, we were already crowdsourcing these stories, and so it was just natural that we self-published a book. So there's a woman by the name of Jasvinder Sangara. She's has an organization called Karma Nirvana. If anybody's heard about Karma Nirvana, it is an organization that protects people from honor abuse that filters into relationships at times. I just randomly ran into Jasvinder and found out that her partner was from Ghana, which was very, very, I guess it just kind of threw me. It was one of those signals from the sky at times. And I also met another gentleman who wrote the foreword by the name of Brennan Carrion. who's from the Gambia. He's a executive coach. He is an MBE. He's done well for himself, and found out that he's also in a relationship with a Pakistani. So it just went to show me that, you know, regardless, well, it's kind of like racism, regardless of how much money you make or how well off you are, this is still something that, you know, can affect you, and it does affect people. It doesn't care about that.
Should we say one questions?
Yeah, I'm almost done. Almost done. Right, I am almost done. So I put this in here. This is bell hooks. So do people know bell hooks? Yes. I didn't know bell hooks, except for hearing her name in probably hip hop songs and things like that. So sadly, when she passed away recently, I came across a piece of book called "Love is the Practice of Freedom," and it said a lot of things to me that I had been wanting to say or had been wanting to write, but I never. It's just one of the, you know, sometimes you read a book and all of a sudden it's speaking to you and it's telling you things that you've been wanting to know for ages. And her writing just did that to me, Love is the Practice of Freedom. But basically what she was talking about is that we should not only fight when we feel that our interests are at risk, but we should be fighting for everybody, right? So we should be, you know, thinking about people in Sri Lanka. We should be thinking about, you know, gun crime, gun violence in the US. We should be thinking about all of these different things. All of our lives are interconnected. And that was just everything that I had kind of been going through for the last year, and trying to raise awareness online and speaking to people and just hearing a lot of negative talk. So bell hooks really, really spoke to me, and she just kind of, I guess, kind of just helped me know that what I was doing was the right thing and for the greater good. And that's me. Thank you. Sorry, you want to have a question?
Yeah, so just the history of race in the South Asian context. I'm personally Pakistani, so I used to wonder whether that got rooted with European colonization, but it turns out that is not the case. The issues around race in the South Asian context predate that. I mean, just the word used for caste.
Yes.
Is color.
Yes.
One literally means color. So once this thing got institutionalized, when it got institutionalized, which is after the fall of the Indus Valley civilization, circa 1500 BC, and a new societal order emerges, which is it's a clearly distinct societal order because it uses a script which is not native. Pre this era, which is 2000 BC, the script of the Indus Valley civilization was different. So a new script is the standard, and what emerges is scripture that calls it out very clearly how the lines are going to be delineated based on color. So it has a long history, which to date. So one has to call these things out. One has to talk about these things. That why, and even though people then moved on to other religions, let's say towards Islam, they still kind of retained those upper class attitudes. For example, in Pakistan as a country, there's just a disproportionate number of people who claim direct lineage to the Prophet. So it's like, you don't want it the standard package, you wanted a premium package if you convert it, so whatever. There's a narrative associated with it.
To the first point though, we're saying caste as the factor for, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying, yeah, integration happens, and then at some point, segregation, delineation is done based on guilds as well, but guilds also as substructures to caste. So that has its impact, and of course, later on, European colonization only aggravated that.
Correct.
Any more for any more?
Any more questions in general? There'll be opportunities later to talk during the reception throughout the festival today.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Farhan, are you happy to go next? Yeah. So I'm just going to invite
Farhan Irfan, who is the co-founder of the startup Saadia Music, which is a streaming service which focuses on Pakistani classical music. And Farhan's going to talk through some of his memories of setting Saadia Music up and where it is today.
open up your presentation.
Switch over.
Oh, what do I have to do? Switch over.
Oh, you have it here?
I've got it. But what is this? Let's see. I think somebody commented, do I have to swap something onto the other screen? Oh, just go for them. Thanks.
Yep, I think it should be. Which screen here should I be looking at?
Just this one.
Great. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for sharing the story. Thank you for having me. I will approach this slightly differently. I'm going to start talking about Saadia music and then work my way back on how I kind of got into it. So my story, or one of the most catalyzing moments for me for Saadia music, happened actually in Hong Kong. I was waiting for my classes to start. I was looking out onto Telegraph Bay and in this room, and I wanted to listen to Pakistani classical music. I went online and I couldn't find it. And I couldn't find good quality content. And I thought, why isn't it there? And so that kind of got me started in this journey of exploration of why is this incredible content that I've grown up listening to, and I know is amazing, and I know it's there, why couldn't I find it online? And that led me to another conversation, which happened with Ustad Shahbaz Hussain. Some of you might know, is one of the leading tabla players in the world. He lives in Rochdale. He's very much from Lahore, where I'm from. And I had this conversation with him when I was in London. I was sitting at SAMI Office Centre, which is London Business School's new campus. And I was sitting, I remember, in this double-storied 10 by 10 room on the sofa, and in talking about why our content is not there, one of the things that he said to me is that it is now your responsibility to do something about it. And that hit me really hard. And the reason he said that was because I come from a family which has patronized this genre of music since 1959. So now it's for 63 years. And it has been, my grandfather started this. My mother still runs this organization. Bilal's sister went to my grandfather in Lahore, where she was doing, in NCA, I believe, at the time. NCA is a school of arts in Lahore. And went to him and said, you know, I want to do something for this in Karachi. And then he helped her set it up in Karachi, and I also have a chapter in Karachi. So the organization is called the Old Pakistanis. It started because of one artist, Roshanara Begum, who is arguably one of the greatest classical musicians in living memory across South Asia. Because she went on national radio and she said, I'm going to stop singing because nobody listens to me. And that hit my grandfather very hard, and he got his friends together. He said, one, I know people listen to it. And two, I'm going to do something about it. So he got his friends together and he put up his first event in 1960 at the Bagajina in Lahore. In the Bagajina, there's a really nice hill, and you walk up this hill, and there's an open air theater on top. It's stunning. And so he did that first event there. It was a phenomenal success. And since then, this organization has been, except for a few brief periods of gaps in between, doing a concert of music every month and the 5-day annual festival. And then the 5-day annual festival, there are over 100 artists which come and perform. And according to some people who have traveled across South Asia, gone to many of these festivals, it is one of the, if not the biggest event for the genre anywhere in the world. And yet, we have all of this content and all of this amazing music and all of these amazing artists, and yet it wasn't available online. And apparently there are 125 million people around the world who love the genre in areas which are surprisingly in South America, in Central America, where one wouldn't even think that there's interest in the genre. And so all of those things put together led me to want to start SOAS Music, which is building an ecosystem for South Asian classical music. And the first part of this is an audio streaming service that you can download on iOS, Android, and you can find it on the web. It's already live worldwide. We have incredible artists there already. We plan to build this out, and now SOAS Music is also available in SOAS, thanks to a large part to Farzana and Richard, who have done this, and I believe thanks to you as well. And so SOAS students can now access this from here. And in the past, it was never available for students to learn, or to research it, or for teachers to teach it. And I think that's going to be a very valuable resource moving forward. In addition to the streaming service, which is the first part of this, people will be able to give Nazrana to artists. And for the non-South Asians here, Nazrana is a very respectable form of an appreciation payments. So when you're listening to the music and the artist does something that moves you, you go up to them and present money to their feet. And you'd be able to do that through SOAS Music from anywhere in the world. And this is incredibly important to the artists, because the artists, naturally, I'm sure you've heard all the stories, struggle, and there are people around the world who actually want to give to the artists, but they don't know how they can reliably do that. And then eventually, we hope, this continues to expand, you'll be able to book artists for concerts, book them for lessons, and more. And all of this is very difficult to access at the moment. And so SOAS Music is both music tech, which is that part, where you can rediscover this incredible music. You can, if you're expats, you can reconnect with your roots. And it gives you very easy access to some exclusive content that you just can't find anywhere else. And then there's also EdTech, because the way we've built this up is that people want to learn more about what they're listening to. And so you can learn more about the rag that you're listening to. You can learn more about the artist that you're listening to. And you can go deeper into that journey of discovery by, for example, if you're listening to Rag Dejavanti, you can go deeper into Rag Dejavanti itself and listen to other renditions of it. And now the reason the content that we have is become so important is because over time we've realized that the content of the Old Pakistan Music Conference covers 85 to 90% of all genre recordings for them that are coming from us. And last month, we had 9 million people listen to it. And so one tends to think that people don't necessarily listen to it, but they do. And it turns out what we're learning so far is it's a very personal activity for most people. And so you typically, when you're not necessarily learning or teaching it, you would listen to it alone. And you don't necessarily hear about it in the public spaces because that's dominated by the corporates who want that very quick jingle to capture your attention, and classical music isn't that. It's something that you sit back, relax, and just listen to. And we're very also proud to say that we are starting to make a real impact for women in classical music. That's something that we highlight very specifically on the platform. And we hope that will build better role models and involve more women in culture. These are some of the women that are highlighted. One story that I want to share is about Noor Zahra Kazim, which Bilal you probably already know of. Noor Zahra Kazim is, she's well into her 70s now. She is the only practitioner in the world who plays the Sagar Veena. Now, the Sagar Veena is a modern Pakistani version of the ancient South Asian Veena. And her father basically developed this for her. She has never been a professional musician, has never pursued music as a career. She has come and performed at the Old Pakistan Music Conference just because she loved playing the instrument. And we put up her music on Saadia Music. And she was trending #1 in the world last year. And now people from around the world want to invite her for concerts and want to invite her for events. And I went to her house earlier this year and I said, I shared this news with her, you've become a role model for women around the world. And she was very pleasantly surprised, but also she had stopped playing. And so when she heard this, now she started playing, which I think is something that we're very proud of. And Saadia Music, we've won a couple of competitions in the US, here in the UK. And what we feel Saadia Music essentially is about is access to content for people around the world. For people to have the opportunity to experience this content, and then for artists to have access to people who want to listen to them, and the opportunity for those artists to be able to be showcased around the world. And here in the UK, this music is significantly underrepresented, and South Asians are significantly underserved, especially for this. So that's my story. Thank you. Open to questions.
Are those 9 million uniques?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Business model wise, what's the rev share on the Nazranas?
We haven't started that, but we're going to build.
What's the business model?
Subscriptions for audio stream, and then when we add other things, then it'll be commission. Trust in a tech guy to ask those questions. You had good questions. Thank you for asking.
Can I ask? Sorry. Okay. After you on that.
Now, just in the context of memory, I was struck by you said about connecting people to memory of music or to memory of, or to an association of culture. I wondered, the idea of being a kind of hub or a, I'm sure that's the actual word you used, forgive me if I've forgotten what the word was, but I was wondering whether there was also a way in which people were contributing their memories of concerts to this or performances, or whether that's a cultural dimension was. So it was a sort of two-way thing. Is that happened, or is that in the kind of pipeline?
It is in the pipeline. Thank you for asking. At the moment, is not as intuitive, I guess. You can't upload it yourself. If you reach out to us on our email address, then we have had people add content to it. We've had now content coming from Indonesia, which is already on the platform. And so we're very open to getting more content on. One story which I didn't share here is, another thing that we're very happy about is when the most recent event happened with Afghanistan. We dug out into our archives and we published a recording from 1964, I believe, or somewhere in the 60s, of the last court musician for the last king of Afghanistan. Ustad Muhammad Hussain Sanahan, fantastic vocalist. We have his recording on here. And we have more that we will release over time because they're getting digitized. We have that on, and some incredible, if you get a chance to check it out, please do. So, we are open to that, absolutely. And we're constantly looking for stuff that has never been published, really. To find a space here so that people can start listening. Thank you for the question.
I have a few questions actually. I think you told me very recently, you shared a story with me, I think we were talking about the artists, something during, Partition, because I know this started in 1959, did you say? But there was something you shared with me, Farhan, about some of the artists during maybe the actual migration from one country to another. Can you just remind me, there was something really, and I said, hold on to it, you must tell us the story. Do you remember? If not,
I think what we were talking about is so what happened during partition, I believe, was a lot of artists decided to move to Lahore, and a lot of artists decided to move to not just to Lahore, to Pakistan, and then some decided to move to India. And during that migration, one of the things that happened was with India, and we were talking about identity before this. Is that India automatically kind of inherited a lot of identity because India retained the name India. Even though there are documents where Jinnah thought that India wouldn't, they would change their name as well, different discussion though. So because of that, they inherited a lot of identity automatically. And they also inherited a lot of structure in terms of institutions, which then, specifically for classical music, patronized classical music. That didn't happen, and classical music has always been patronized by the Mughal or the British, and then other institutions, and now the Indian government in India is doing it. That didn't happen in Pakistan. Those institutions had to be built, and because so many did, the government never really got around to building structure, institution, or patronage for classical music in Pakistan, and that's one of the reasons that Roshan Ara Begum, incredible artist, went on national radio and said, I'm going to start singing. And then private individuals like Hayat Khan, my grandfather, had to step in and say, all right, so we're going to do something about it. But the story is still very similar today. Despite the government wanting to, there have been various challenges throughout Pakistan's history that many of us are aware of, due to which this is just not a priority. Which is a shame, and so which is where again somebody has to do it, and then who takes on that responsibility of trying to do it. So this is our attempt to take on that responsibility of doing something or whatever we can for them. And was that what we discussed?
Yeah, I think this is what we were.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is very exciting because we're the first academic institute to purchase Saadia music, so we're honoured, and it's really exciting for Farhan to have it. Hopefully, it will spread to other places. And also, I know that you have sold this to retail stores in Lahore. Yeah, so you've played there, which is really lovely. And I think our aim is to, we're not just going to be selling this to our arts and humanities students. I agree, you might have a law student, economics student who may want to relax and listen to some some nice classical Pakistani focused music as well. Can I ask, what's the response been like in Lahore, what for Lahoris and Pakistanis in general?
Yeah.
How's it been?
So thank you for bringing the point for the corporate in Lahore, in Pakistan that started. Kesariya, Bilal, which you might know of, Kesariya signed up as a corporate subscriber. So essentially they said we curated an album for them, and that was a soundtrack for Kesariya to be played in all their stores, 80 stores nationwide. And so there was initially this huge resistance from the store managers saying, what is this music? Why are we playing this? What's going on? And then we started doing surveys about this, obviously because it is a business, they don't want their customers to run away. So we started doing surveys on the customers themselves, on whether, what they think about the music when they walk in. And Kesari is very much a cultural heritage brand in any case, so the brands align very well. But then the customers, it turns out, I think about 80% of the store manager was like, we should scrap it. But the 70% of the customers that walked in loved it. And about 40% of the people who made the purchase said that we were encouraged by the music also to make a purchase. And so the response has been phenomenal. Again, for most people, this is surprising. Even back home, for people around me, this is very surprising because everybody's like, but who listens to this music? Clearly a lot of people.
So is there music exclusive to the platform that I will not be able to find on Spotify?
Correct.
Okay.
How many artists have you signed up?
How many?
Over 100.
Over 100.
Over 100. We have, and we continue to get more. Just this month, we've now started releasing content for the up-and-coming artists, up-and-coming stars, so Muslim Shagan and Chand Khan, Suraj Khan. Immersed in that? Okay. Your sister, she'd know exactly what I'm talking about. The up-and-coming artists who are, in their 30s or their 40s, who are really showing a lot of promise. We just released this stuff on Sari Music as well. So with the SOAS subscription, you don't have access to a fixed catalog. You have access to a continually evolving catalog.
Yeah, you're constantly curating it.
And curating it, putting up more. And SOAS is the first, and now Harvard is considering an institutional subscription like this as well.
And I got you in touch with Oxford and Cambridge and a few others, and Manchester. They have quite a big South Asia focus, so hopefully they will consider it. Are you hoping also to sort of create like a revival, of Pakistani music? And what about young people? Do you think there is an interest? Is there a...
Yeah, great question. So 53% of our users are 18 to 35. So surprisingly young. Turns out it wasn't about the music, it was about access to it. And now that they have access, they are listening. So I don't know about the revival, it turns out it never really needed to be revived, because if there are 125 million people, and that's a large chunk, it's more about connecting those people to the artists, because the survival of any culture depends on the people who are creating the content for the culture. And the artists are the people who are really making the music, and if the artists can't make a career out of it, then we've seen a lot of artists actually stop. A lot of artist families who would naturally continue their generational legacies we've seen that stop. And so we need to flip that.
One time when I was visiting Karachi, there were Ustad Ashraf from Germany, was a scholar player, and there was a workshop for younger kids, like elementary school kids. So that kind of exposure was great. It was great to see kids inquire about the instrument and the history of the instrument, be drawn to.
This is Ashraf Sharif Khan, who we just mentioned.
This wasn't.
This is the web player for Saar music, and so you can go and explore lots of different music. That's gone, but can you see that? Okay. So not only do you get to listen to it, but you can also then, explore more here. And just to give you a sense of what the magic of Ashraf Sharif Khan. Can you hear that? Not very clearly. This can go on for a while. There's lots more to do. Just to give you a sense, just a sense of he's, in my books, one of the leading sitar players in the world at the moment. He's truly incredible.
So, one question. From an educational point of view, I think you said you had interest from people aged 18 plus. How would you see this coming into schools, the young children, secondary school children, primary school children, bringing it in earlier?
Great question. We would love to do that. Over in Lahore, we're already talking to one school to do it. And there are other schools which, one of the things I just spoke about was, what we want to do is gifting subscriptions. So next month, you'll be able to gift a subscription to your friends and family. So if you want to give it to your children or your grandchildren, you'll be able to do that. But then what we're also going to be adding is gifting a subscription to a school. So lots of schools in South Asia especially, even in the US, community schools, which can't necessarily afford the entire overhead related to a subscription. People can give, once those schools are signed up, and this might be 6 months down the line, once we have that all set up, but you would be able to gift a subscription or pay for a school's subscription. And this would get into schools as well, but yes, that's the...
How do you envisage the schools using this? Because at the moment it's the artists' music, their background, their history. How would a teacher use this? How do you see this developing?
Great question. We'd love to work something out. You're a teacher?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Let's discuss. We'd love to learn how we can do that.
Yes, because I mean, in schools, I can see there are violin lessons, cello lessons, but more classical music, opening it up to the wider community. I'd be interested to know what the viewpoint is on that.
We would love to do it. I'm not an educator, so I wouldn't know how this can potentially be structured. But what's happened in SOAS is essentially Richard wants to include it in the courses. So it's included in the course. It's going to be a part of the curriculum. And it's a listening resource, I believe.
Yes.
One of the things would be a listening resource. So, for example, if he's teaching, go research about Rag Jajavanti, which we just played, then instead of him having to put in 50 different links of Jajavanti on YouTube and Spotify, etc., that might already still be there. But this, one click to Jajavanti, and the whole. Back on? Okay. So the whole then you have a whole list of Jajavantis that they explore. Or for example, if he's talking about, let's say, just an artist, you just scroll down and you say, all right, today we're going to be talking about Saadia Gardezi, and then you have this entire list of new content that you can listen for Gardezi. Or he wants, the teaching about the Punchwala Gharana, then you have, can you see it from this?
Yes.
Okay. So Gharana and then sitar, and then, we have all of these different, very easy to navigate ways to kind of go deeper into the music. And I know that, for the university, that's valuable and that makes sense, but I'm not very happy to work
I
around
would
thinking
say
it's
it's part of the core music curriculum, say in primary school or secondary school, but at the moment, if I can see how it would that include.
Well, Farzana mentioned something that was very interesting, that this will also kind of you rank. There's a music ranking of the music schools and the music program.
Yes.
And kind of this kind of resource adds to that.
Absolutely. So the rank, yes. So
To the
this is
ranking.
the research excellence framework. So you put forward all your research output, and now music SOAS is ranked 3rd in the world. And I think that is also down to the fact we are a very unique school, and we have a module here which is on Indian and Pakistani classical music. So Richard, who's one of our academics, asked me to get this, and I was quite excited because I think it's quite okay to say that Pakistani music is very eclipsed by Indian classical music, and I know there are many overlaps, but there are also very unique features to Sari music, and I just think where else better to have it but SOAS, which is a great place to have it. But I think that's a really interesting question about having it. How can it develop in schools? Because we have an academic here who I know quite well. Her area is West African music, and she takes the kora instrument, which is a West African instrument. She goes into schools into Norfolk and spends the day teaching them how to play the kora in the little village in Norfolk. So I think something like this, I think it could certainly develop and should develop. Maybe.
How does this get into our imagination? How does it become a part of who we are? Really, I mean, if kids are exposed to this, I mean, I was exposed to it, which is why it's a part of who I am. When I was very young, that's when I was exposed to it. And if that happens, in schools, then, when you have access to really good content, then only then can you then decide to pursue it as a career.
And just quickly say, when I said like the word revival, I think that was wrong word. What I meant is I have many friends, South Asian friends, and I like Indian classical music, but by no means do I know it on the same level as you. But I love tabla music, love Qawwali music, listen for years and years. So I'm going to see Anushka Shankar in October, and when I sort of put it out to my friends, they're like, no, and they're from India, no, it's just not my thing. Very sorry, no, not really my thing. But I love it. So I mean, more people should remember what it was.
To be a little, Anushka Shankar isn't really classical.
I didn't just say in terms of the instruments that she's playing. I mean more about the instruments. I don't need to compare. But
if you compare, for example, if you get a chance to compare Anushka Shankar, who's very good, to Ashraf Khan, not even close. Ashraf Khan is, or Ustad, Shahid Parvez, who's from India.
Yes, I know. Yes.
And he was here in London. I think last week he was here. Just a completely different level.
Yeah.
So in terms of
Yeah, but even these artists, it should open up more really.
Absolutely.
I think people have a bit of a stereotype about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much. Were there any more questions? Yes.
I was just wondering, what's the script? Is it Shamukhi which is used to write this song?
That's a good question.
Oh, I have no idea. I don't think there's a script.
Shamukhi is what is this side of the border, and Gurmukhi is what is.
So good, yeah.
other side.
Shamukhi would be, it's Urdu, but in
Urdu?
Yeah.
Punjabi script.
Oh.
But the Arabic script, Shamukhi.
No, it's Urdu and
In
Punjabi.
For Punjabi, yes.
So it has.
So what script? That's a good question.
What, if you talk about classical music or even poetry, that Shamukhi is what is popularly called writers and poets and lyricists and this type of stuff. So I was because the whole process.
Are we talking about the musical notes or the language itself?
Language itself and the script. Of course, each.
Nastaliq, Urdu is like Nastaliq.
Yeah.
And the Gurmukhi, like, it's those are.
Well, that, yeah.
That
Oh,
could
good,
be.
monkeys.
Yeah, because it's called Shamukhi.
Yes,
It's not
I know,
called-
yes.
because Then Shamukhi has words from Urdu literature.
Yes, yes.
And many of the classical singers and
Yes.
famous ones have used that. So I'm just wondering whether your library also has selected joint use or.
No, so I
It's
mean,
not-
the music is there,
Yeah.
but I couldn't tell you what it's.
The script, you don't know what the actual script is, Shamu.
Yeah,
I don't think that's featuring here. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been brilliant. I mean, please stay for the rest and the rest of the festival. Saadia, would you like to go? Sorry. Thank you, sorry. Your images is on the desktop.
Okay, let's try to get this. Right, I think this is here.
No, Saadia.
Yeah. See. Oh, it's this system. No, that's my phone. That's your landline. Should I?
Yes, so I'm very excited to introduce Saadia Gardezi, who I can say is a political cartoonist and journalist and a PhD student at the moment at Warwick University. And Saadia is also the co-founder of Project Dastaan, which is an immersive experience and I don't know if you're okay for me to use the word peace building initiative relating to partition. And I will let Saadia tell us more. Thank you.
Thank you, Farzana, for that. So I will just tell you very briefly about Project Dastaan. Project Dastaan started a few years ago as an effort to reconnect partition witnesses with their ancestral homes across the Indian or the Pakistani border. And because of the age of these partition survivors and because of the political situation between the countries, we found it was very difficult for people to travel, people to get visas, and so how about a virtual return? And so what we do is we record their memories, we go and speak to them, have an interview, and then we try to find the places they tell us about, and we film them using 360 footage and various tech. And then we show that to them with VR glasses. And it's kind of a way to give back to this community that is now very aged, and we're losing our contact with them, and kind of to virtually give them a return back home. So in that context, because this is called Memory Box, I thought I would share the memory of one of our participants rather than my own memories, because this is a memory-based project and we deal with kind of the intangibility of what memory is, and can you actually ever really go back home after such a long time. So I will today tell you the story of Dr. Saida Siddiqui, and her story was personally very touching for me. And it's kind of stayed with me ever since. So in about 2018, we interviewed Dr. Saida Siddiqui, who migrated from Lucknow, and she went to Karachi in Pakistan. And she didn't travel in the 1940s, she went in the 1950s, which goes to show how long a process partition was and how this was a continuing migration that didn't just happen at that point in history, but exists over decades. And her family basically migrated because of an Urdu-speaking family. They found it was very difficult to adjust in New India. Language was an issue, the medium of education became an issue, and so the family migrated to Karachi. So Saida told me the story of her childhood in Lucknow. Everything that she ever missed, loved, was left behind. And she never truly saw Karachi as her home. Saida was a 16 or 17-year-old medical student at the time, maybe 18, when she migrated, and her college was in Lucknow. While at this college, she met Sarfaraz Siddiqui, and they were medical students together. And when Saida left Lucknow, Sarfaraz was left behind. And there was a little bit of a friendship, a budding romance, as far as we knew from Saida about them. When she reached Karachi, she was working there as a doctor a few years later in the 1950s. A message came to her that someone called Sarfaraz was there at the hospital, Lady Wellington Hospital, looking for her. She came to realize that Sarfaraz had also migrated soon after with his family in an effort to find Saida's family again and propose to her. And so they got married, they settled in Karachi, and then eventually they left Karachi and came to the United Kingdom. So this is a picture of Sarfaraz, who sadly passed away, I think in the 1980s. So while we were speaking to the family about Saida and how we could show her now again, they started rediscovering Saida's story again as well. So these are just some snippets from her diary. This image here with all my love to my darling from Saida they discovered was at the back of the picture that the film had never seen. And so after many, many years, the family itself was rediscovering the love between Saida and her husband, their grandparents. So this was a very sweet memory that was rediscovered. I also have a page from her diary here, which is some Urdu poetry, and it appears from her notes that she was someone who wrote poetry, copied down couplets, etc. So this little couplet translates to, and this is a loose translation that I've taken liberties with, that life is a song, though a painful one. If the song is pain, how can I sing? And this is from 17 February 1950, right before maybe that she migrated. So Project Dastaan ended up trying to find her memories and look now. So we did, for her, we created a VR experience where we went back to her college. She talked about boat ride at the Potomzy River, especially with Sarfaraz. We tried to create an experience where you're actually sitting in that boat and you can experience that ride again. We went to the university and we found that her name was still on those boards that are hanging there about who graduated and what year. And there's her name, and a few rows below is above is Sarfaraz's name. So we found the roots of this love story in Lucknow. The students here also sent her messages and everything. So that was kind of our experience in our exploration of Saida's memory. Sadly, Saida passed away last year. And this is when we had lockdown because of COVID-19 in the UK, and we could not visit her to show her her VR experience. So her story, for us at least, kind of remained, that loop remained unclosed, that even though we went and explored Lucknow for her, we could never show her again her favorite town, her childhood town, and her childhood memories again because of her age. And I think for a lot of partition-based projects that work with oral history, this is the downside of it, that we're losing this generation to speak to. So even though a lot of these archives exist, Project Dastaan has tried to kind of put these memories in a new format in front of people using VR and try to get these stories out again in new ways rather than being locked up in oral history archives at universities. So that's my little speech about memory, especially Saida's memory. And I also just want to prompt everyone that if you please follow us on our social media, Project Dastaan, because we have a VR film and some award-winning film we showcased at Sundance that is going to be exhibited in venues across London and across the UK. So if you are in town in August and September, do have a look at our program and come and see our VR film, where we try to give the viewer an experience of migration and the experience of what colonialism and what migration might have meant to a young migrant in 1947. So that's it for me. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
I just wanted to say that I worked with Saadia and SOAS with Project Dastaan, which is an incredible project, very amazing. And I'm honoured that we're going to have Project Dastaan touring. It starts at the V&A on the 29th of July. I will be there, Saadia, and we're going to have Project Dastaan in the Wolfson Gallery, which is in SOAS Library, and they're going to be here for 2 months.
September and October.
September, the whole of September, the whole of October, as part of this tour. It's going to Bradford, the BFI, Birmingham, and Derby as well, yes. And then it's going to go on to India and then Pakistan. So it's, Lahore,
we're doing Lahore, Karachi, and I think Amritsar, Delhi, and I think if there's anything else that
So, it's going to be touring, so I hope it gets real exposure, but we're really excited to have it in the Wilson Gallery, and I'm looking forward to helping set it up with the team. And so, we're going to hopefully also have some events. We're going to have some panel talks. In fact, if anyone was here yesterday, there was someone by the name of Ajay Chhabra who works for Nutcut, which is incredible. I've invited Ajay back because we really need to hear more about his toolkit work. He goes out and does a lot of outreach work in schools, and they also connect with history, for example, at Partition. So yes, please do keep an eye on our pages. The tour is going to be phenomenal, I'm sure. Did anyone have any questions?
2 questions. Are you collaborating with any of the other initiatives happening in this space, like, for example, 1947 Partition Archive, Citizens Archive?
Yes, we are. So we have partnerships with them, and our tour in Pakistan is in collaboration with the Citizens Archive Pakistan, and we're going to be at the National History Museum as well. So we are direct partners with them for our tour.
And 1947 Partition Archive?
For research purposes, yes. But a tour where the archive is still to be sorted out.
And the second question was, have you thought of like a permanent installation for this exhibit?
We would love to do that, but right now it depends on the museum spaces and the demand for this. What we've been able to set up again within the UK as a temporary, our temporary exhibitions, but the one in India at the Partition Museum in Amritsar is going to be a permanent one, and we remain to be seen what the Pakistani partners want for this. We would love it to be permanent. We would be.
Like a follow-up on that.
Yeah, but it just depends on fundings, grants, timing, all the numbers. Yeah.
And are you going to be in Pakistan and India when it's touring?
I'm going to try to plan to one if I can with my university
Of
schedule.
course,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Was another question?
I just, it's interesting actually to be invited to come in and listen to you guys. I was born in Kenya, not far from Uganda, and I do a lot of traveling, retired, and I use my time, leisure time, to go and find out what's going around the world. There's an awful lot of Asians who migrated in the probably 1800s to Africa, right up to South Africa, from all parts of the world, right into Nigeria. Music is very dominant, Indian Asian music is very dominant in Nigeria, for example. It was a few years ago. And people did put on an Indian movie, and they'd play 4 movies in a day, for 12 hours and sit there glued to Asian music. Russia is another place, and I don't know whether there is interest for yourselves to look at these. We're tempting to focus just made in Britain, but there are people who came to Britain via Africa here.
Yes.
But what's their story that I don't know if anybody's captured that?
As again, we're a young, small project, but we have in our work in the last 3 years come to the realization of how diverse an experience being South Asian or that connection is, Partition. So we are focused on Partition, but we are focused on Partition in the sense that we are also looking at other versions of Partition. And I feel that there is this one version where there is this migration Africa. We have it also celebrated in literature, if you read with Nabal by any chance. And then there's various other partitions in these concepts that we're exploring where, for example, there's a sea border that was created after 1947 as well. They kind of dipped apart the seafaring communities of South India, separated
after World War II, separated Burma from India, separated the communities that would go across to Sri Lanka, Thailand, Singapore, and that community. And so we are focusing on that diversity of stories. We haven't really reached into the African experience yet, but if the project can continue to have life in the next few years, yes, that's the diversity we're looking at. And we kind of, one of our co-founders, Sam, is right now writing a book saying that there wasn't one partition, there were 5 different partitions that happened. Like, there's this one rarity of line that, but then there's the border at the side of Bangladesh, there's various versions of how partition. So I think your comment is absolutely relevant, and we were talking about this before as well, that how kind of Africa and that experience has been maybe disregarded in South Asian imagination and the imagination of who we are as a people and the movement. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Can I just say, actually, excellent question, because one aspect for this festival was I was very keen as well about diasporas that go further. And we were keen, and hopefully we'll do it next time, focus on it more, not just dual, but triple heritage. Absolutely right. All the communities that were dispersed across Africa, East Africa, we know this, and other parts of the world. So we were very keen to look at that as well. I would actually pitch in for South Asian Heritage Month here. They are running events now for the next month, and they are also looking at not just India and Pakistan, they are focusing on all the other nations of South Asia, and I know they are also looking, I believe, more at Afro-Asian heritage and relationships, food, culture, anthropology, and that was something I wanted to focus on here. I don't know if it's happening, but Sanjukta, who's the co-director, told me that she was going to get some Afro-Asian music, some element. Don't think it's happening now, but we are very open to having further dialogue. I'm very keen on that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Yes.
So I think, what do you have some?
You can connect.
We'd love to see the images of so while Aditi is setting up, Aditi Kumar is an art historian and cultural practitioner. She's presently a visiting fellow at Warwick University. And her scholarship interrogates the role of art and culture in the formation of post-colonial nation states and national or regional identities of the global South. Her current research focuses on how family photographs and biographical objects reflect and shape experiences of displacement, exile, and migration. Thank you.
Thank you, Farzana.
I think we're just going to, that screen is going to change.
Just
It's so good because I realised we've got people all around and I don't want anyone to miss anything. Just give me a second.
So I'm just sorry, this technical lag, sorry for that. And today I'm also going to read poetry, which is not my part of my direct academic work. Since we've been talking about multiple kinds of partition, and I'm looking at the partition that happened, between the communities on both sides of the Jammu and Kashmir border. So that partition actually happened in November 1947, not in August 1947. So my PhD work is basically based on photographs and objects from both sides of the border. And today, what I also want to share with you is the words which are part of intangible heritage and culture, because many of these families couldn't carry objects with them. You know, they didn't actually have proper clothes because they were walking for months and living in camps, so they were in tattered clothes. And then what is, memory is object for them. That's their words. So the words replace the tangibility of material culture or visuals. So, sorry. So first I'm going to show the pictures of, a person who shared a dual identity. She was born in a Hindu family, and she was left behind in Pakistan administered Jammu and Kashmir, and which is known as Azad Kashmir in Pakistan, and in colloquial language is POK, but academically it is called Pakistan administered Jammu and Kashmir, and this side is called Indian administered Jammu and Kashmir. And as many of the women who were left behind at both sides of the border, she was also left behind. And she is no more, but her story was recounted to me by her son, who is now 76, 77 years old himself. And so he was the person who was instrumental in basically reuniting her family, Indian family, after 40 years, that's 4 decades. So these are very rare photographs because most of the families who, I went to document didn't want to disclose the women who were left behind, whether Muslims, Sikhs, or Hindus. So it was, it's rare to find, families who would like to share such, hidden material or rare material with a researcher. So she is Fatima Bibi, and this is her, passport photographs that were shared by her son. And also a very interesting thing, what he told me was there was this Repatriation Act, which was signed between India and Pakistan in late 1950s, that you send us, women from our side, and we'll send women from your side. And popular Bollywood movies, Pinjar, Khamosh Pani, they all talk about that. But in that case, the women didn't have any agency. They were not asked whether they would like to go back, they would like to stay back, because many of them had restarted their lives with, new partners and children, and many of them refused, but they were forcefully, extracted from both the sides and sent to their respective families. So her case also becomes rare because she actually could escape that extraction. And via crossing the borders of Pakistan, she came to UK because her husband that time was working in the UK, had just come as a laborer or something, because it's also like Britain was under post-World War economy, like building the economy. A lot of South Asians came as laborers to build a new economy. So under that, a new lease of life started. And this is the son I'm talking about, Mr. Zaid Ali, on the left of the picture. And now it talks about, a new life. They started anew, building houses, getting jobs, etc., etc. The next picture is again of Fatima B when she goes to Jammu after 40 years, and she is shown with her, sister-in-law. It's not full screen, so sorry. Yeah. Sorry for the technical glitch. Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay. So this picture is again of Fatima B when she goes to Jammu, and it also talks about the duality of the identity, because she is shown wearing a bindi on her forehead. So again she dons this character of an Indian woman, and the next picture is from PAJK with her daughters, and then this is the later picture. So what I really wanted to show from these images was like the role a person had to play, the duality of identities, where the state actually, it kind of controlled your, identity. And also in terms of people who didn't have objects or valuables to share, then these photographs become very important to look at the stories. So I have huge material which is shortly going to go online, because I have been documenting and researching on partitioned families and their family photographs and objects for the last 7 years. And the next what I want to share with you is actually, it's okay, no, it's done. Okay.
You just need to keep this.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I'm just going to read the poetry.
Oh, okay, sure.
So I don't really need. So yeah. So the next, I don't know how many of you understand Punjabi or Pahadi. Yeah. So we have a few. So the thing is, first I'll read it in Pahadi language, because I think the essence is somewhere lost in translation. And then for rest of the people, I'll translate that into English. So this is basically written by a Sikh poet who is very popular at both sides of the border. His name is Swami Antara. He's been traveling to Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir side of Pakistan, as well as in India. So this is written on the people who had to leave their homes in the middle of the night to either sides of the border. And the title is As Nikli Aaya, that we have left our homes. As Nikli Aaya, Kadiyan ch sui tazi kutti, che manja lehriyan, tre danda niya jodiyan, sab chhodi aaya. As Nikli Aaya, Simlu tosiyan kemri, fitniyan kanakoliyan, खोड़ प्लम खुमानियां बागू गोशे खानियां खेडां ते शैतानियां सब आनियां पंचानियां दिल बुजनियां रू जानियां कुर्बानियां अस निकली आया अमन जमाना छोड़िया चाचा रमजाना छोड़िया संग फत्तू काना छोड़िया मैं आना जाना छोड़िया रुकने ना बहाना छोड़िया सम ए बहाना छोड़िया फिर दिल मरी जाना छोड़िया अस निकली आया उनमें काफला सा राच थके मत्या राच भुख खादी राच त्रे पीती राच फिर चुलियां राच कैर चुलियां पिछले पैर चुलियां किन्ने तेने गए थकने बहने गए छुटने रहने गए अस निकली आया अनपुंछे ने कैदी होया चार चुफरे मौत ही टोले टकडम बोली बोले भुख बीमारी साड़ी किस्मत गिद्दा उल्लू घाग भी खादे पत्तर भासे साग भी खादे विच कैंपा ने रुलने रहा कुनास ए बोलने रहा पुलने पालने टूरी आया डूंगे सुफनियों उड़ी आया लंबे सफरों मुड़ी आया अमन जमाना फत्तू काना खोजा ते चाचा रमजाना दादी की सुफने विच आने कै कुछ बाने दादी भी नूरा की रोनी ए होनी सी की अनहोनी दादी ने हुन मत गई है होश नहीं है पत गई है पिछला फिर भी याद है उसकी चलने लोरे च टुर जाने जे पुछो कुदर जाने बाने अपने कर जाने अपने कर जाने So this was the Pahadi poetry. Now I'm going to read the translation. We fled, that hunting bitch with her litter on the grass, the milch buffaloes with udders heavy, 3 pairs of sturdy oxen too, leaving behind all livestock, we fled in how. Exotic figs and wild berries we left, walnuts, plums, apricots, and pears delectable we left. We left behind our games and pranks. we left our peers too. Those who knew our hearts, those who knew our souls, those who recognized the sacrifices we made, we left them all behind. We fled. Peace and quietude we left. Chacha Ramzan we left. One-eyed Fattu we left. We left frequenting their places. We left to our excuses of staying back. We left saying we are one. We left behind our bleeding hearts, but we fled. Now a part of a deserted travelers, on exhaustion, we lay on the way. Now a part of deserted travelers, on exhaustion we lay on the way. Our hunger we ate on the way. Our thirst we drank on the way. Turmoil prevailed on the way. Havoc prevailed on the way. It happened in the last watch. Countless among us kept falling down. Haltingly, we marched on and on. The stragglers we left behind, and thus we fled. We became the prisoners from Punch. Death surrounded us from all four corners. It spoke the tongue of tickdum, tickdum. Dying of hunger was our fate. We fell to eating owls, crows, and vultures. We stuffed ourselves with leaves too. We kept forgetting who are we. Knowing not where to go, we have blundered to where we are now. We have woken up from deep dreams. We are here after a long travail. That peace and quietude, Fattu the one-eyed, Khwaja and Chacha Ramzan, Grandpa dreams of them all. They talk to him without end. Grandma too misses her Noora. Such parting was destined, or was it a calamity we know not? Grandpa now has lost his wits. He isn't aware where he is, yet he keeps memories of his past. In his fits of dementia, he has given to wonder. If asked where he is off to, going home, he says, going home, he says. Thank you. Questions?
Sorry, I missed the part of the story, but left behind in what way? People left to the other side, she was just left behind by herself.
Yeah. So the thing is, the beauty about this place in particular is they are not divided by religion. They all speak a common language. Pahari is the language in which I spoke.
Okay.
The original text is spoken by Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims. So when, so basically, if I can just put on the map maybe. So the partition, when the partition of India happened, Jammu and Kashmir as a state was a princely state. So and when the attacks started to happen, so it was like the Muslim population will go to Pakistan, and the Hindu and Sikh population will come to the Indian parts of India. So, and this part in particular, it's a long belt which runs in both sides of Jammu and Kashmir, and the ruler thought that of course it will come under Indian part, and then attacks starting to happen. Some say they were Afghani or raiders and Kabili attackers, and some say it was orchestrated by the Pakistani government. So it happened after the official partition of 1947 happened. That was in the month of August. So all this mayhem which was left loose happened in November 1947, because officially Indian government still claims those parts as part of India, but judicially and administratively those parts are under the Pakistani government. So if you see the map of India, the crown, it is basically not the same crown, because there is an internal line drawn after the Narratives line, that is called LOC, line of control. So ceasefire happened between India and Pakistan. That is later in the official 1947 division happened between both countries.
And vice versa, what she's saying from the Indian perspective, that's exactly the opposite for the Pakistani perspective.
Yeah, so they say that Kashmir is ours. So that kind of, political conflict is ongoing since 75 years, because now, in next month we are kind of, it's the 75th anniversary since partition. So the status, if I go into the political conversation, it's still suspended. This belt, unlike the West Pakistan, Pakistani refugees or the East Pakistani refugees, the Bangladeshis, they have the status of refugees, which is an official status. But this belt does not enjoy that same status because they are called internally displaced people. So no law actually gives them that status, because there was this conversation which is very informally recorded that when the people from this community went to Jawaharlal Nehru to request him to give us that status so they can, have the equal rights and facilities like rest of the refugees from Pakistan. So Nehru said, who was our ex-prime minister, like the first prime minister. So he said that if I do so, then I give out the message that that part is no more of India, So that kind of a turmoil and, a political kind of complex nature has resulted in the age-long suffering of these people. And it's still ongoing, because if you go to the borderlands, they still don't have rights. And so a lot of people, and oral traditions, because most of my PhD work is based on oral narratives. So plays an important role to really buttress my research on material objects and visual histories, is primarily because of the fact that most of them are not literate, especially on the borders. They were farmers. So their tradition is passing down the oral narrative from one generation to the other. And their songs, the folk songs, and the stories have been passed down from one generation to another. So that's why poetry becomes a very important tool. For instance, a very popular song, the Pasuri song, it's pop Pakistani song, which has hit off the charts. It was trending on Spotify as one of the most popular songs. And in New York Times, it was said that, this song has brought India and Pakistan together, because in India it was so popular. So, literature, poetry, music, they transcend the borders. So that's what it talks about, synchronity and secularism. So that's that. And why I also showed this particular women and her life story is something which personally also kind of hit home in a way when I just moved to London just before the pandemic. And this person was the first person to really extend that help, because I just landed in London. I was in my apartment. I didn't have any sauce or anything. And he from Birmingham, he couriered me all the groceries and stuff. So that he has no blood relation with me. A person who is Pakistani from, by origin, holding a British passport, is helping me just like that. We just share the same roots. That's it. No connection whatsoever. So that is the story which my entire project is about, and it's an ongoing, to really reflect beyond these political boundaries, fixed notions of political borders, and look at the porosity of cultural borders. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's very refreshing to hear stories of people who work in France and have oral histories as the main mode of personal history, because often when we talk about partition, it's overtaken by a particular classmates. Correct. Who have photographs, who have material objects, and who also are easily accessible to people working on oral history or connections. So I think it's important. It's not just going beyond, as you said, the partition has been discussed, but it's also going beyond class, which I think is also very often gets missed.
And my photographs are also